Amen. If you got a Bible, we're going to be over in Mark chapter 11, verse 27 is where we'll start. We'll go into chapter 12 through verse 12 in just a moment. Hey, we had a wild week here at church. We had a great kids week, and it was awesome every night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We were here from 6:30 till about 8:30 with a big group of preschool students, elementary age students, talking about what it looks like for us to run after the prize that is Jesus. Our theme verse was 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 25. It says, everyone who competes in the game goes into strict training, but they do it to get a crown that will not last. We recognize that there are people across in another country celebrate or competing for a crown or for a medal that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. And so we've been talking with children and students about that all week long, and then we had an awesome week, and it was such a blast. Thank you for those who entrusted your children to us. Thank you to those who served and volunteered this week. It was a great week. The second thing I want to tell you is that next week on the 4th, we will be celebrating baptism together. I don't know which service yet. I believe it's second. But if baptism is your next step, I just want to let you know that next week the water will be ready. And so the water will be there. And if that's your next step and you want to talk to somebody this week about baptism, then you follow up, you have that conversation, and we'll talk about baptism. And if that's where you are in your walk with the Lord, we want to help you just understand that next step. And if you're ready to take it and call you to it and say, come on, let's go. Next week would be the perfect opportunity for you. This week, as I was thinking about the text and thinking about some of the things that are there in the text, I started thinking about my parents. And I started thinking about my parents and my upbringing with my parents, and started thinking about my relationship with my own children. And at the conclusion, when I was thinking about that, I'm thinking about the conflict that existed inside of the home. Like, my parents are awesome parents. They were great people and are great people. And they didn't stop being great people. They still are great people. And I love them dearly, but they weren't perfect parents. And I was far from a perfect son, but I started thinking about the relationship that we had. And just to our credit, we really only had one major disagreement over the 18 years I lived there. Just one. We only had one issue in 18 years, and here was the issue. They thought that they were the ones who could tell me how to live my life, and I thought that I ought to be the one to get to decide how I live my life. Let me give you some examples. They thought they had the authority over me to say things like, hey, don't punch your sister. Hey, you need to eat these vegetables. You have to make your bed. You can't ride your bike past the bridge. Hey, you can't stay out that late. You have to give some effort in school. You have to respect your teachers. You have to be home at 11:30. You can't drive past the bridge, different bridge, but you can't drive past the bridge. And that was their opinion of how I ought to live my life. But I had a different view of how I ought to live my life. I wanted to punch my sister. And I wanted to eat bologna and Little Debbie's. And I didn't want to go to bed. I wanted to stay up as late as I wanted to. I didn't want to come home. I wanted to treat school like a social experiment, not an educational opportunity. I wanted to drive the car where I wanted to drive the car when I wanted to drive the car. And so the issue that my parents had over the 18 years I lived in there was just one issue. But it was the issue of who's in charge. Who's in charge? Who has the authority over my life? See, they believed that God had placed them in my life to be for me the authority that I needed in my life. But I believed that they didn't know what was best for me. These old, out-of-date people, how do they know what's best for me in my life? See, I needed to be my authority. And when I think about my relationship with God, as you think about your relationship with God, here's where the rub is, isn't it? It's an issue of authority. To what degree will God be the authority in your life? Does God really know what is best for you? And is it really what's best for you to live in submission to him as he is the authority and not you? And what implications will it have for me and for you if we get to a place we surrender fully to him and say, God, you're the authority. See, this text today, really at the heart of it, is about authority. So let's go Mark chapter 11, verse 27. And they came again to Jerusalem. As he was walking in the temple, the chief priests and scribes and elders came up to him and they asked him. Now, before we get to the question they asked him, let me just give you some context of where we are. We're in the book of Mark. You hopefully know that by Mark chapter, the top of your Bible. But we're in the book of Mark. We've been in the book of Mark for some time. And we have entered into, several weeks ago, we entered in what's is known as Passion Week. The week leading up to, the week involved in the death of Jesus. And if you take notes in your Bible, maybe draw a line out from verse 27 and just write Tuesday right there. That's where we are in context to the last week of the life of Jesus. We're on Tuesday, not the life of Jesus, the death of Jesus. But we're on a Tuesday. And he comes into Jerusalem, and the scribes and the priests and the elders, they come up to him and they ask him, by what authority are you doing these things? There's our word. Who gave you this authority to do these things? Here's what they're asking him. Who do you think you are? Jesus, who do you think you are to do the things that you are doing? What these things, you might say, what things are you talking about? Well, we could go back to last week and see where Jesus goes into the temple and he sees the money changers there and he starts flipping tables in the temple and making declarations about the intent of the temple to be a house of prayer. But meanwhile, just wrecking shop on the temple and they're saying, hey, what authority do you do these things? They could be going back further than that, and an instance in the text before the triumphal entry of Jesus, or right after it, there he heals a blind person. And they're saying, hey, what authority are you doing these kinds of things? Now, it was traditional. Jesus isn't going off script here. It was traditional when you would ask a rabbi a question, they would in turn ask you a question. Customary for interactions with a rabbi, so they ask him a question, and he responds with a question. Jesus said to them, I will ask you one question. Then answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was John's baptism from heaven or of human origin? Answer me. Now, John the Baptist, who he's referring to, in John the Baptist, in Mark chapter 1, we see John the Baptist making these incredible claims about Jesus. We really read about it through several points of the gospel where John the Baptist is saying, here comes the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. This is what he's saying about Jesus, as he is a forerunner of Jesus, is pointing to Jesus and making incredible claims about the person of Jesus. John goes into the water with Jesus, and he baptized Jesus. And when he baptized him, he brings Jesus up out of the water, and the heavens open up, and God speaks and says, this is my beloved Son, with whom I'm well pleased. Remember that term, my beloved Son, for later on today. But they're asking the question of John's ministry and saying, hey, what's the deal? Or Jesus is asking the question, then what's the deal with John the Baptist? Is he just a human saying these things, or is there something more about John the Baptist? Was he in the baptism, when he baptized me, was it from heaven or was it of human origin? Verse 31, they discussed it among themselves, and they recognize we are in a pickle. If we say from heaven, he will then say, well, why didn't you believe him? But if we say of human origin, then we're afraid of the crowd, because everyone thought so highly that John was truly a prophet. So they answered, we don't know, which is quite incredible, by the way, right? You all have people in your life who thankfully they're in your life, and you don't necessarily have to use an Alexa or Google because they know everything, right? And you got people in your life, and you're thankful to God for those people. And religious leaders were the people that kind of prided themselves on having all the religious answers. So when they respond to Jesus and say, we don't know, it speaks volumes. And Jesus said, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. And then we continue, roll right into verse 12. It's the same setting, the same scene, the same group. And he says, he began to speak to them in a parable. A man planted a vineyard, put a fence around it, dug it out for a pit for a wine. Their minds might have went back to Isaiah chapter 5. We can give a lot of different examples. We'll go Isaiah chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, which we read this. And you tell me if there's some correlation, some connection that you hear between the two. I will sing about this one I love, a song about my loved one's vineyard. The one I love had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He broke up the soil. He cleaned it of stones. He planted it with the finest vines. He built a tower in the middle of it. He even dug out a wine press. He expected to yield good grapes, but he yielded worthless grapes. So with Isaiah chapter 5, 1 and 2 in mind, we move into this vineyard, but we kind of understand who the players are in the story now, I hope. The vineyard is Israel. And we understand that the owner of the vineyard is God. The tenants are the ones who are supposed to be leading this whole thing, are the religious leaders of the day. So now we understand the players in the story. Let's continue through the parable. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the farmers to collect some of the fruit of the vineyard from them. But they took him and they beat him and they sent him away empty-handed. Again, he sent another servant to him. They hit him on the head and treated him shamefully. Then he sent another, and they killed that one. He also sent many others. Some they beat, others they killed. So there's a owner of a vineyard who sends a servant to get some grapes and to check on the vineyard, and they keep beating them up. Best case scenario. Worst case scenario, they kill them and send them back. Right? Can you imagine? You have a little servant meeting of the owner, and he's like, hey, need you to go check on the vineyard. Oh, no. Jeff checked on the vineyard last week, and he's still not back. And it was Ralph before him, and just continued down the list. Man, and this guy's still all busted up and bruised from the time he went and checked on the vineyard. Now, he said, no, but here's the pattern with the vineyard. Some they beat up, others they killed. Look at verse 6. Jesus just pointing to what is to come in the rest of the week. He still had one to send. A beloved son. Remember what we said about in Mark when John the Baptist baptized Jesus and he comes up out of the water and the heavens open up and God says, what? This is my beloved son with whom I'm well pleased. And then Jesus, in a parable, says he sent a son, but not just a son, a beloved son. Finally, he sent him to them saying, they will respect my son. I'm going to send my son. They wouldn't listen to these servants, but surely they'll respect my son. So here he goes. I'm going to send him. But those tenant farmers said to one another, come, this is the heir. Come, let's kill him. And the inheritance will be ours, will be our own authority. So they seized him, killed him, and threw him out of the vineyard. What then will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and kill the farmers, give the vineyard to others. Haven't you read Scripture? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. So just imagine what's happening in the audience right here. They know the players in the game. They understand who the people are represented in this parable. They get the vineyard is Israel. They get that God's the owner, and they get that they're the tenants. They get it all, and the tension is rising. And when they finally kill the beloved son, and they said, well, what's he going to do? He's going to show up. He's going to show up. And he continues on. He says, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. And he kind of shifts analogies here. It goes from a vineyard to a building and talks about the cornerstone. That Jesus is the cornerstone, the most foundational, fundamental, and important piece of a building. It will determine how the building sits, whether it's straight or not, whether it can face any kind of longevity or not. He said, this came about from the Lord and is wonderful in our eyes. And then he continues on and says they were looking for a way to arrest him. So after he tells us they huddle up, they were looking for a way to arrest him but feared the crowd because they knew he had spoken this parable against him. So they left and they went away. So their plot to arrest, seize, and kill Jesus had to wait another day because they feared the crowd. So what in the world do we take away from this text? Really just two things I want us to remind us of today. Number one is a clear reminder of the authority of Jesus. There's a clear reminder of the authority of Jesus. And I say reminder because if you've been hanging out with us over the last several months, we started this series at the beginning of September. If you've hung out with us over the last several months, you've seen the authority of Jesus on display. You've seen that Jesus has authority over disease. You've seen Jesus has authority over death. You've seen that Jesus has authority over nature. You've seen and where he will teach and they go, whoa, he teaches like one who has authority. You've seen Jesus has authority to forgive sins. His authority has been on display throughout the book of Mark. So when we see the authority in Mark chapter 11 and 12, it's not a new teaching for us, but it's a reminder of what we've seen throughout the book as a consistent teaching that Jesus is like no one else. And he is one of complete authority. And time after time and page after page throughout the book of Mark, we see the authority of Jesus. And we're going to see it in a new way as he has the power over death in the life of others. And spoiler alert, although I know we've already preached Matthew 16 at Easter, we're going to see it again when Jesus defeats death and comes back from the grave. And he's going to huddle up. This is not going to be in Mark, but it's going to be over in Matthew 28. He's going to huddle up with his disciples, and he's going to say this: all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. All authority. There is nothing on the planet outside the authority of Jesus. There is nowhere you can go where he is not over and where he is not in authority. Growing up on Friday and Saturday nights, me and some buddies, we would get in, take all of our cars down to a parking lot in a place called Clarksville, Indiana. And there was a really mall, I'm going to say nice, but I would have been lying to you. There was a mall right here and another mall right here. We had dueling malls right there in Clarksville. And we had a road that led between the two. And so you can imagine that on Friday and Saturday night, this was the spot we would go to cruise. And they kind of got fed up with it at the malls because it was just bumper to bumper, line to line, traffic jam that people wanted to be in. It was crazy. And we would cruise from one mall to the next, back and forth and back and forth. And so finally they said, hey, the mall had a policy now where they said cruising is no longer allowable. Okay. And if they would set up these security guys in vehicles, and if they saw your vehicle come through more than twice, they knew you weren't looking for a parking spot. They knew they were cruising, and they would get in line and try to then pull you over. We were pretty easy to spot. We were usually driving a truck. We usually had about 8 to 10 people in the back of that truck. We had lawn chairs set up. We had a little small table in the middle, right? We were pretty easily to spot as we made our way through the mall. And so every now and then, that car would pull in behind us. Those yellow lights would flash. You know, not the blue lights, but the yellow lights would flash, and they weren't there to help us change our tire. And we would drive, and we would go, and we never pulled over. But we knew that their jurisdiction reigned between the Green Tree Mall and the River Falls Mall, and if we can just get down the street a little ways, they will turn around and head back to the mall. And so that's what we did. We would drive our cars till we got out past their jurisdiction, where we parked other cars. We would hop in the next guy's truck, and we would go back and take a few more laps. And because here's what we knew that they could only follow us so far, that there was a spot that their jurisdiction ended, and if we got to that spot, they would merely turn around and go back. When you consider the jurisdiction of Jesus within the world and his authority in the world, there is no limits to where he rules and reigns. There is no limit to his authority. There is nothing that can come into your life outside the authority of Jesus. That when you watch the world and you see what is happening in the world and you're tempted to despair, you go to the doctor and you get a diagnosis where you're tempted to despair, then we remember, no, Jesus is the authority. He's the authority in my life, and there's nowhere outside the jurisdiction of Jesus. When you listen to, about 15 years ago, I heard the guy named Matt Chandler talking about the book of Philippians, and he made this statement. He said, a Christian fully convinced of the authority of Jesus is truly an untouchable person. And then he goes on to say something that I've heard many people say since then. I hadn't heard it until then, but surely someone has said it before him. But he said this. He said that Paul had to be the most frustrating people for those who were trying to persecute him possible, right? They would say, that's it, Paul. You keep preaching. We're going to kill you. And Paul would just say, perfect, to die is gain. Right? They say, okay, we're gonna put you in prison. They say, great, to live as Christ. And then Chandler goes on to say, because if you put me in, Paul could just look at them and go, you put me in prison, I'm going to preach to the guards, they're going to convert to Christianity, and then they're going to go out and do the work I would have been doing. Do with me what you want. And for those trying to persecute Paul, had to be really, really frustrated. Why? Because he was an individual fully convinced of the authority of Jesus. Fully convinced of the sovereignty of God in the world. And today we just want to be reminded of his authority. The second thing there's a call to respond to the authority of Jesus. Now, you know by now, if I say a sermon only has 2 points, you can guess that there's going to be a point with some subpoints, and this is the point. Right? This is the one that's got the subpoints underneath it. There's a call to respond. And there's 3 questions I want us to ask today about the authority of Jesus. The first question is this. Am I submitting to the authority of Jesus in every area of my life? Am I submitting to the authority of Jesus in every area of my life? If Jesus has complete authority, that includes me. Am I submitting to the authority of Jesus in my life? Am I submitting to his words and his teachings? And this is really hard because we think and you think and I think we know what's best for us. And we desire to submit to our feelings over Scripture. We want to submit to our own desires over God's word. So the question becomes, are there areas of your life where you're not fully submitted to God? Is there an area of your life, if you're in the room and you're a follower of Jesus, you said yes to the authority of Jesus when you said you're going to follow him. You said yes to his lordship when you said, hey, I want to follow him. But let's ask the question, is there an area of your life where you're not fully surrendered to the authority of God? Are you at a place where tomorrow morning you can wake up out of bed, you can sit up, you can put your feet on the floor, and you can say to the Lord, this day is not my day. It's your day. Every thought I think, every dollar I spend, every conversation I have, may it be pleasing to you and consistent to your word. God, I want to live today in complete authority to you, not living a life of my own, but living a life fully surrendered to you. What would it look like for your day to be marked by that prayer, for your drive into work tomorrow, to be, God, thank you for this job. And God, I pray for the opportunities that you give me in this job, and I pray that today, as I carry out the tasks and responsibilities associated with this job that you've given me, that I do everything in this job under your authority and live pleasing to you. What if you get in that car to drive home to a family member or a family at home, and on the way home, you're just saying to God, God, be with me on this drive and be with me as I walk in that door. God, every conversation I have, everything that I say, every reaction to an action of my children, I want to be a reflection of who you are and what you're doing. I want to live under your authority. This mindset is hard, because oftentimes we have an owner mindset, not a steward mindset. We don't view life as like, here, I'm here just representing God, a manager of the stuff God's given me and stewarding my life and responsibilities for his glory. No, we can easily shift to a steward mindset, to an owner mindset. This stuff's mine, right? It's my stuff. It's my job. It's my words. It's my attitude. It's mine. And sometimes we struggle with the authority of God when we forget that we're here to steward our lives for the glory of God and rather think we are owners of our lives. On Friday, I went to a little LabCorp spot to get some blood drawn for some routine blood work, which is always exciting and fun. And I make my way in. It's kind of crowded in there. But about time I walk in, a seat opens up, and it's a prime seat in the LabCorp. I can look out the window. I'm not surrounded by a bunch of people. The seat is all by itself. It's not in a bunch of other seats. You're not sitting on top of anybody. It's the perfect seat in the whole LabCorp, and I'm in it, and I am totally content to scroll on my phone and wait for them to call my name because I got elbow room, leg room, and I'm living large in the LabCorp. By the time they call my name, they want to see my paperwork. So I said, yes, I'm Matt Walton. And I walk up there and I hand them my paperwork and we have a little brief chit-chat conversation. And I'm totally content to turn and walk back to my seat. But in the 30 seconds it took for me to walk up front and give her my paper, I turn around, there's some lady sitting in my seat. I'm like, don't she know? Nobody tell her? You know, she's sitting in my seat. That is mine. That is my seat. I'm going to have to go sit in here, a bunch of people, probably sit on somebody's lap because she's sitting in my seat. And then I looked around that LabCorp and I thought, wait a minute. I don't own anything in here. Nothing in here is mine. There's not a single thing of mine at all. Like I'll leave some of my blood, but other than that, there is nothing of mine. How ridiculous for me to look at that chair and go, that's mine. What's she doing in my spot? Man, how easy is it for us to live life under this ownership mindset? We like look at your stuff, that's my stuff. It's my time. It's me time. It's mine. That's my car. That's my what? No, we're just merely stewards. And where we're going to struggle to live under the authority of God is when you wrestle with this idea of ownership versus stewardship. There's this great book called The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. If you're not familiar with The Screwtape Letters, it's basically this written from the perspective by C.S. Lewis of two demons in conversation, right? It's like the uncle demon is writing to his nephew demon, the nephew's writing to the uncle, kind of giving him reports back of how it's going as he's trying to mess with this mere human. And in chapter 21 of the Screwtape Letters, little Wormwood writes back to his uncle, he said, the sense of ownership in general is always to be encouraged. The humans are always putting claims to ownership, which sounds equally funny in heaven and in hell. And we must keep them doing so. Do we view the world as mine? Is there areas of our life where I don't submit to the authority of Jesus? And is it directly connected to just where I've failed to see myself as a steward and a manager of what God gives, but see myself as an owner? Number two question is this, as we consider this response to the authority of Jesus. Am I overly concerned with the opinions of people? When we look at the religious leader, their primary concern is always the crowd. Their primary concern is always others. What will people think? Well, we can't answer that question because the people will turn on us. We can't arrest Jesus here because the people will do this. And they're always thinking about, what about the people? What are the people going to do? Are you overly concerned with the cares and concerns of the people? And there's a second question here closely related, but we'll keep it all under the same question. Is this idea, are you prepared to face any type of persecution or hardship because of your allegiance to Jesus? Like, you recognize something in the story we may not talk about, but in this parable, every single person that was sent by God or sent by the owner, right, in the parable, sent by God on a mission in the parable, sent by the owner on a mission, what happened to every single one of them? They were all beaten. Best case scenario. Are you prepared to face persecution as you live on mission for God in a world that is growingly hostile towards Him? Or are you so overly concerned with the approval of people that you can't live under the authority of God because you have some type of reputation or standing that you're trying to uphold? Third question. Am I motivated by God's grace, or God's great love towards me? Do I consistently and intentionally think on God's love towards me? When was the last time that you sat and thought and considered, if you're a believer, a follower in Jesus, about God's great love towards you? You need a place in your prayer life that is carved out to remember the love that the Father has for you. He sends a servant, he comes back beaten. He sends another one, he comes back wounded with a concussion. He sends another one, he gets reported as dead. And after all of these things, he thinks, man, what am I going to do? And the owner thinks, well, I know what I'll do. I'll send my beloved son. No way. There's no way. Like everybody who shows up there gets beaten or killed. And your response to this is I'm going to send my beloved son? I'm going to send my son? Yeah, I mean, they shouldn't hurt him, but you know they're going to hurt him. You know they're going to kill him. Why would he do that? Why would the owner send his son? There's really only one answer. Because he loves his vineyard. And when we look at this parable in full totality of Scripture, and we understand that for generation after generation after generation, God has been sending prophets to Israel to speak truth to them, and these prophets continually get beaten and bruised, sawn in two, killed, and left for dead. Prophet after prophet, read through the Old Testament, God looks at his people and says, I know what I'll do. I'll send my son. The love of the Father. The love of the Father to send his son in response to broken people. This vineyard story, it's just a picture of the gospel. It's a picture of the gospel that you and I, in our sinfulness and our rebellion against God, God responds to our rebellion with him and by sending his son to die on the cross for our sins in our place, the death we deserve to die, to pay our penalty for sin by going to the cross on our behalf, 3 days later defeating death and rising from the grave. Why does he do it? He does it because he loves the vineyard, because he loves you, and he loves me. And so today we close our time together with a couple of considerations. If you're in the room and you're a follower of Jesus, my hope is that today you've asked the question, is there an area of my life where I fail to submit to the authority of Jesus? Is there an area of my life where I am leading and I am not following God, where I honestly believe that I'm doing this knowing that it's outside the Word of God, knowing it's outside of God's instruction, but I'm just not sure God knows what's best for my life, and so I'm going to continue to walk down this path. Is there an area of your life you're not submitting to Jesus? Second thing, if you're in the room today, and every single time we gather, we try to talk about the gospel and point out to who Jesus is and what he's done, and point out this great love response that God has demonstrated for us. And I tell you, it doesn't get much easier to point that out than today's passage. That there's a people who repeatedly rebel against God, repeatedly rebel against the owner. And the owner says, I know what I'll do. I'll send my beloved son. They shouldn't kill him, but they did. And we stand today as sinners in rebellion against the holy God. And God, in response to our sin, sent his son to die a death on the cross that we should have died. And if you're in the room today, maybe today's the day where you say, I want to trust Jesus. I want to follow him. I want to surrender my life to him. I want to say yes to him. If that's your next step, we got these next step cards on the chair, and you can just flip that over. You can fill that out. You can drop it in one of these boxes in the back. I'll be at the front. You can bring it to me. You don't have to fill the card out at all and just come and talk. Or maybe you're here today and you say, man, there's some areas of life, if you're a believer, follower of Jesus, there's some areas of life I don't want to leave here without praying through. I'm seeking to be my own authority. Man, when everybody stands to sing, you can just sit right there. If you want to come up front and just kneel at the front and just pray to the Lord, you can do that as well. If you want to pray, somebody, I'll be up here and we can talk. Would you give consideration to who is the authority of your life? And not just one area or two areas, but in every area of life. Let's pray.